My husband left me for my best friend and took everything from me. I was sleeping in my car. But a lawyer called me. You are the sole heir to $77 million, but to claim the money you must. Good day, dear listeners. It's Briella again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please subscribe to my channel and like this video, and also let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I used to think I had the kind of life other women pin to vision boards. A house in Naperville, Illinois. A real one, not a starter home. 4 bedrooms, a backyard with a gas grill. Marcus never let anyone else touch. A kitchen I had renovated myself with subway tiles and open shelving. I worked as a hospital administrator at Northwestern Medicine. 12 years of climbing, budgets, and staffing, and the particular exhaustion of keeping other people's crises from becoming institutional disasters. Marcus ran a mid-size commercial real estate firm. We were, by every external measure, fine. Better than fine. We had been married for 11 years. We had a Labrador named Hatch. We had a joint savings account with a number in it that made me feel safe in the way only money can. We had a standing reservation at a Thai place on Friday nights. I was 41 years old, and I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. Christine had been my best friend since college. 22 years. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. She held my hand through my miscarriage in 2019. She knew the password to my email in case I was ever in an accident. I want you to understand that before I understood anything, I loved her completely. The first signals came the way they always do, quietly, dressed in ordinary clothes. Marcus started going to the gym in the evenings. That was the fall of 2022. He had never been a gym person. I noticed, but I didn't question it because I was proud of him, genuinely. He looked better. He slept better. I thought, this is what 44 looks like when a man finally takes care of himself. Christine started canceling on me. Lunch rescheduled, then dinner, then the weekend trip to Michigan we'd been planning since spring. She had excuses that were technically plausible. Her mother's health, a work deadline, a leak in her apartment. I noticed. I felt a small, cold thing move through me, but I told it to be quiet. There were smaller things. Marcus's phone, always left face up on the counter, began traveling to his pocket. He started doing his own laundry. He became slightly kinder to me in the way that people become kind when they are managing guilt. Attentive in a way that felt performed. Compliments, arriving at odd moments, disconnected from anything that had actually happened between us. I noticed all of it. I assembled none of it. The human brain is extraordinarily good at protecting itself from information it cannot yet survive. The evening it broke open was a Tuesday in March 2023. I came home from a 14-hour shift. The house was dark. Marcus's car was gone. There was no note. I called him 4 times. He didn't answer. I texted Christine to ask if she'd heard from him. A reflex, the way you reach for the person you always reach for. She didn't respond either. By 10 o'clock, I was worried. By midnight, I was something else. A woman standing in her own kitchen, holding her phone, feeling the shape of a truth she had not yet named. He came home at 2 a.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the lights on. I remember thinking that I looked very still for how fast my heart was moving. He didn't sit down. He stood in the doorway in his coat and he told me he was in love with Christine, that it had been happening for 8 months, that he wanted a divorce, that he was sorry but that he wasn't coming back from this, that the house, our house, was technically in his name, a detail from 11 years ago that I had never thought to revisit, that he needed me to leave. I remember asking him to repeat himself, not because I hadn't heard, because I needed one more second before the world rearranged itself permanently. I took my car keys, my purse, my phone, and a coat. I left my own house because I didn't know in that moment that I had the right to stay. That is the thing about being blindsided. It doesn't just take information from you. It takes your sense of what you're entitled to. I drove to a 24-hour Walgreens parking lot on Route 59. I turned the engine off. I sat in the dark in my car in my work clothes, and I thought, Christine knew my email password. She was in my wedding. She held my hand. I didn't cry for a long time. When I finally did, it wasn't the kind of crying that releases anything. It was the kind that just empties you out and leaves the structure standing. I slept in my car that night, seat reclined, coat pulled over my shoulders. The parking lot lights stayed on all night. Somewhere after 4 a.m., I stopped asking why and started asking what next. That was the first question that would save me. I woke up to a Walgreens employee tapping on my passenger window. It was 6:47 a.m. He was young, maybe 22, and he looked more frightened than I was. "Ma'am, you okay in there?" I told him I was fine. I told him I'd had car trouble. He nodded the nod of someone who didn't believe me but had decided not to press it, and I watched him walk back inside under the fluorescent entrance light. I sat up slowly. My neck hurt. My mouth tasted like old coffee in shock. I looked at myself in the visor mirror for exactly 3 seconds, and then I looked away, because there are moments when self-assessment is not useful. What did I have? I ran through it practically, the way I ran through hospital budget shortfalls. My car, a 2021 Honda CR-V in my name, fully paid. My phone, my purse, which contained my wallet, 2 credit cards, my driver's license, and $340 in cash. My work ID. My laptop, which was in the back seat because I'd brought it home and never taken it inside. My health insurance, through my employer. My salary, $18,000 a year, which still existed for now, as long as I kept my job. What didn't I have? The house, the joint savings account. Marcus had moved quickly. I checked the app while sitting in that parking lot and watched $74,000 disappear into a transaction marked transfer. The furniture. Hatch. 11 years of a shared life that had, apparently, been quietly packed up around me while I was working 14-hour shifts. I am not going to pretend I wasn't afraid. Fear is not weakness. Fear is information. But I had been managing crises for 12 years. I knew what panic did to decision-making, and I refused to let it drive. I called my bank first. I secured my individual checking account, changed the password, and flagged the joint account transfer for dispute. The representative was careful and neutral and told me to contact a family law attorney as soon as possible. I wrote that down in the Notes app on my phone because writing things down is how I stay inside my own competence when everything outside it is chaos. I called my colleague Janet, who was the only person at the hospital I trusted completely. I told her a version of the truth, that I was dealing with a personal emergency and might be 15 minutes late. She told me she'd cover for me and to drive safely. I drove to a McDonald's, used the restroom, ordered a large coffee, and sat in a corner booth with my laptop and began making a list. That is when my phone rang. The number was a 312 area code I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I am glad every single day that I did. Is this Sarah Callahan? A man's voice, professional, measured. It is. Ms. Callahan, my name is Robert Voss. I'm a probate attorney with the firm Voss and Mercer in Chicago. I'm calling regarding the estate of Eleanor Whitfield. I stopped typing. Eleanor Whitfield was my mother's older sister. We had not been close. She'd never married, never had children. She lived alone in a large house in Lake Forest that smelled like old books and good bourbon. She sent me birthday cards with handwritten notes until I was about 30, And then we drifted, the way people drift when no one is quite hurt enough to cut the cord, but not close enough to maintain it. I had heard she was ill. I had meant to call. I had not called. "Ms. Callahan," Robert Voss said, "your aunt passed away 6 days ago. You are named as the sole beneficiary of her estate. After taxes and legal fees, the net value is approximately $77 million. I put my coffee down. I want to be honest with you. My first feeling was grief, not for the money, for the cards she used to send, for the woman I hadn't called. My second feeling, arriving about 30 seconds later, was clarity. Robert Voss explained the process carefully. There was a verification period, documentation to gather, a court filing. Nothing would move quickly. Probate in Illinois takes time. He needed my identification, my proof of relationship to Eleanor, and an in-person meeting at his office as soon as I could manage it. He stressed one thing very clearly. Until the estate was settled, I should tell no one the specific details, not the amount, not the timeline. "These processes attract attention," he said, "and attention complicates them." I thanked him and hung up. I sat for a long time in that McDonald's booth. The breakfast crowd moved around me. $77 million, and Marcus had already moved $74,000 the night before, probably to a joint account he'd quietly opened with Christine. He had moved fast, which meant he had been planning this, which meant the gym evenings and the hidden phone and the performed kindness were not just an affair, they were a campaign. I had been outmaneuvered by people who loved me, or claimed to. That was the last time I let that sentence make me feel small. My first plan was not complicated. It did not involve revenge. It involved 3 things: a family law attorney, a forensic accountant, and absolute silence. Marcus did not know about the inheritance. Christine did not know. No one knew except Robert Voss and me. Information is leverage. Silence is strategy. I finished my coffee, closed my laptop, and drove to Robert Voss's office on Michigan Avenue. I was still in yesterday's work clothes. I had not showered. I sat in the lobby of a law firm worth several $100s an hour, and I thought, you will not see me coming. Robert Voss was not what I expected. I think I had been imagining someone older, warmer, the kind of attorney who worked with grieving families and had a box of tissues on his desk. He was 48, precise, the kind of man who listened with his whole face still. He offered me water. He did not comment on my clothes. We spent 2 hours in a conference room on the 31st floor of a glass building on Michigan Avenue, Lake Michigan flat and gray, through the windows behind him. He walked me through the mechanics of Eleanor's estate with the thoroughness of someone who understood that the information mattered more than the speed of its delivery. Eleanor had accumulated her wealth through decades of commercial real estate investment. Properties in Lake Forest, Winnetka, and one significant parcel in the West Loop that had appreciated enormously. She had sold most of her holdings in 2019 and moved the proceeds into a managed trust. She'd updated her will in January 2023, 2 months before she died. I was the sole beneficiary. The estate had already cleared the initial filing stage. Robert estimated the full process would take 4 to 6 months. "What do I need to do today?" I asked. "Give me your identification, sign these preliminary acknowledgement forms, and authorize me to file the beneficiary notice with the court." He paused. "And Ms. Callahan, I want to reiterate my advice about discretion. In my experience, inheritance news has a way of reaching people it shouldn't, and it changes how they behave." I signed everything. I left with a folder of copies and his direct number. In the elevator going down, I stood very still and let myself feel, for exactly 30 seconds, what it meant to have a floor beneath me again. Then I thought about Marcus, about the $74,000. The next morning, I called a family law attorney named Diana Reyes, whose name I'd found through the Illinois State Bar Association's referral service. Her office was in Oak Park. She was 53, board certified in family law, and she had the particular manner of a woman who had heard every variation of this story and had stopped being surprised without stopping being effective. I told her everything: the 11-year marriage, the affair with Christine, the house in Marcus's name, the drained joint account. I did not tell her about Eleanor's estate. Robert Voss's advice was firm in my mind, and Diana didn't need that information to do her job yet. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, Diana said. The house being in his name alone doesn't end the conversation. Were marital funds used to maintain it? Did you contribute to the mortgage? For 8 years, I said, before he refinanced in 2018. She nodded slowly. And the account transfer the night he told you, do you have documentation? I had screenshots. I handed them across her desk. She looked at them for a moment. We're going to need a forensic accountant. I told her I'd already been thinking about that. Diana filed the initial divorce petition that Friday. She moved to freeze remaining shared assets pending discovery. It was formal, quiet, and irreversible. The first official gear had turned. I know the exact moment Marcus understood something had changed. He called me on a Sunday afternoon 4 days after I'd filed. I was staying at a Residence Inn in Evanston. Nothing expensive, nothing dramatic, just a room with a desk and a door that locked. He had been texting me in the tone of someone who expected me to be manageable. He called now. Sarah. His voice was careful. I think we should talk, outside of lawyers. I have nothing to say outside of lawyers, I said. A pause. You filed. Why did you file so fast? Because you drained the account and put me in a parking lot, I said. Why did you think I would wait? Another pause, longer. I want this to be civil. I knew what civil meant to Marcus. It meant convenient for Marcus. It will be civil, I said, through our attorneys. I hung up. I could feel his alarm through the phone even after the call ended. He had expected grief. He had expected mess. He had not expected a petition and a freeze motion filed within a week. Christine called me that same evening. I didn't answer. The forensic accountant Diana referred me to was named Gerald Park, and he was methodical in the way that only people who genuinely love numbers can be. I gave him access to 6 years of tax returns, bank statements I'd downloaded before Marcus changed the passwords, and credit card records I'd kept copies of for our annual financial review, a habit I'd developed at work that had never seemed important until now. Gerald called me 11 days later. Ms. Callahan, he said, I found consistent transfers from your joint account to a secondary account registered under Marcus's business entity, going back to March 2021. I wrote down the date, March 2021. That's 2 years, I said, 26 months more precisely. The amounts range from $3,000 to $12,000 per transfer. Total accumulated, approximately $190,000. I sat with that number. I had been in that marriage for 26 months after someone had begun quietly dismantling it from underneath me. Every dinner out, every vacation, every Saturday morning where I thought we were simply tired, Marcus had been moving money, planning. Christine had probably known. The miscarriage I'd had in 2019, Christine holding my hand in the hospital and then going home to my husband. I requested a full written report from Gerald. I held the preliminary printout in both hands and felt its weight. 7 pages of numbers that represented the architecture of a betrayal I had not understood the scale of until now. This was the point of no return, not because of anger, because of evidence. You cannot unlearn what you have documented, and what I had documented was enough to change everything. Diana received Gerald's full report on a Thursday morning. I was sitting across from her in the Oak Park office when she read the summary page. She didn't rush it. When she set it down, she looked at me with the expression of an attorney who had just watched a case become considerably more winnable. "This changes the discovery phase substantially," she said. "If he's been systematically diverting marital assets since 2021, we're not talking about equitable distribution of what's left. We're talking about dissipation of marital assets, which the court takes seriously." She clicked her pen twice. "We subpoena the business account records, we depose him, and we file for an increased share of the marital estate based on documented dissipation." How much of an increase? Potentially significant. Judges don't look kindly on 2 years of hidden transfers. She paused. "Sarah, I want to be direct with you. This is very good for your case." I nodded. I did not feel triumphant. I felt something closer to the particular calm that arrives when you stop hoping you were wrong about something and accept that you were right. Diana filed the amended petition with the dissipation claim that same week. The subpoenas went out Monday. I think the subpoena is what broke Marcus's composure. He appeared at the Residence Inn on a Wednesday evening. I don't know how he found which hotel. Probably he still had access to a credit card statement that showed the address, a detail I corrected immediately the next morning. He knocked on my door, and when I opened it, he was standing in the hallway in his work coat, looking like a man who had been holding himself together all day, and was now, at 7 p.m., beginning to lose the grip. "You need to stop this," he said. He wasn't shouting. His voice had the tight, controlled quality of someone who wanted to shout. "You're going to destroy my business." "Your business received money that belonged to both of us," I said. "The court will sort out what belongs to whom." "Sarah." He stepped forward slightly. "I'm trying to tell you. If you push this, I will make things very difficult for you. I have documentation too. I have records of your spending, the home renovation costs. I can argue you were financially irresponsible and—" "Then file it," I said. "That's what discovery is for." He looked at me for a long moment. I think he was looking for the version of me who had sat in a parking lot at 2 a.m. and didn't know she was allowed to stay in her own house. That version of me was not available. "You've changed," he said. "I've always been this person," I said. "You just didn't find it useful to notice." I closed the door. The next escalation came from Christine. She called me 3 days later, and when I answered because I had decided that silence was sometimes less effective than witnessing. Her voice was controlled in the way of someone who has rehearsed. "Sarah, I understand you're angry. I would be angry too. But what you're doing with Marcus's business accounts, this is going to affect both of us, and I need you to think about what you actually want out of this. Do you want money, or do you want your life back?" I let the silence sit for a moment. "I want what's legally mine," I said, "which is something your attorney can discuss with mine. You don't have to do this through lawyers. We could—" "Christine." I kept my voice level. "You held my hand in a hospital when I lost a pregnancy. And for at least 2 years before that conversation, you were sleeping with my husband. I have nothing to say to you outside of a legal proceeding." I heard her breath catch. "You think you're going to win this," she said, and her voice had dropped the rehearsed quality. "You think this is a fight you can win, but Marcus has lawyers too, good ones, and you are one person." I'm one person with 7 pages of bank records, I said. Have a good evening. I hung up. My hands were completely steady. Diana called the following morning to tell me that Marcus's attorney had reached out attempting to negotiate a settlement, significantly lower than what we were claiming, but the fact that they'd reached out at all meant they were worried. We declined. We were not at settlement stage. We were at discovery stage, and every document that came in made our position stronger. That was Friday. I had been running on crisis energy for 3 weeks. On Saturday morning, I called Diana and told her I was taking 48 hours. She told me that was sensible. Gerald Park had everything he needed from me for the next phase. The legal machinery was moving on its own momentum now, and I needed to stop feeding it my nervous system. I drove to a small inn in Galena, 3 hours from Chicago, far enough to feel like a different world. I ate dinner alone at a restaurant on Main Street. I slept 9 hours both nights. I walked along the Galena River on Sunday morning in the cold and let myself feel the full weight of everything that had happened, because I had learned that the only way out of grief is through it. I thought about Eleanor, about the cards she used to send. I thought about Marcus's face in the hallway, that look when he realized the manageable woman was gone. I thought about Christine saying, "You are one person," and how she had meant it as a diminishment, and how wrong she was about what one person could do when she finally understood what she was worth. I drove back to Evanston on Sunday night. I was ready. I returned to Evanston on a Sunday evening with my coat still smelling like wood smoke from the Galena Inn's fireplace. I had 43 unread messages. I read them all in order, the way I read hospital incident reports, systematically, without reacting until I reached the end. Most were logistical. Diana with a procedural update, Gerald with a clarifying question about one of the 2021 transfers, a reminder from the Residence Inn about my weekly billing, my colleague Janet checking in. The last message was from Marcus. It had been sent Saturday evening while I was eating dinner alone on Main Street. Sarah. I've been thinking. I don't want this to become a war. I think we both know that what we had was real for a long time. I'm willing to offer you a settlement that gives you the house and a fair share of savings, and we close this out without court. No depositions, no forensic accounting made public. You could be done with this in 30 days. Think about it. This doesn't have to destroy us both. I read it twice. I want to be honest about what it did to me. There is a part of a person, the part built by 11 years of shared dinners and a dog named Hatch and the texture of a life, that responds to that kind of language. He had written what we had was real. Some of it had been. That's the thing about long betrayals. They're embedded in real things. But I had been in Galena for 2 days, and I had thought clearly, and I understood what this message actually was. It was not remorse. It was management. He had seen the subpoenas land. He had watched discovery begin. He knew that the depositions would expose the 26 months of transfers. He wanted me to take a clean settlement, the house, a fair share, before the full picture became a court record. He was trying to cut his losses. I did not respond to Marcus. I called Diana first thing Monday morning and told her about the message. She confirmed my read. He doesn't want those business account records in a public filing, she said, which tells us exactly how much more is in those records. She paused. Do not respond without me. I know, I said. Christine's approach came by text 2 days later, and it was different in texture, softer, aimed at a different part of me. Sarah, I know I have no right to ask you anything, but can we just talk? No lawyers, no agenda, just 2 people who used to know each other. I miss you. I know that's absurd to say, but it's true. Don't you wonder what happened to us? I stared at that message for a long time. What happened to us, Christine? I thought. You made a choice. For 26 months, every time you called me and asked how I was doing. You made a choice every time you sat at my kitchen table, every time you came to my hospital room. That's what happened to us. Not a thing that fell on you, a thing you kept choosing. I did not respond to Christine either. The silence was not coldness. It was clarity. There was nothing to say that a legal proceeding would not say more precisely. What I needed, what I had been doing without since the parking lot, was not strategy. I had strategy. What I needed was witness. Someone who would sit with the human parts of this that no attorney or forensic accountant could touch. I called my cousin Miriam on a Wednesday afternoon. Miriam was 51, a high school art teacher in Madison, Wisconsin, 2 hours north. We had been close as children, grown apart through geography and the busyness of adult lives, kept in loose contact through birthdays and occasional phone calls. She was the kind of person who listened without assembling her response while you were still talking. I told her everything, all of it. The parking lot, the hotel room, the court filings, even Eleanor, because Miriam had known Eleanor too, had her own grief about the loss. I talked for almost an hour and a half, sitting in my hotel room with the curtains open on the Evanston street. When I finished, Miriam was quiet for a moment. "Do you need me to come down?" she said. I hadn't expected that. "You don't have to." "Sarah, do you need me to come down?" I looked at the hotel room around me, the desk with my legal folders, the single chair, the room that was functional and correct and completely impersonal. "Yes," I said. "I think I do." She drove down the next day. We walked along the lakefront in the November cold, past the Northwestern campus, our breath visible. She didn't offer advice. She didn't try to solve anything. She just walked beside me while I talked, and occasionally she said things like, "Of course, and that makes complete sense," not to flatter me, but because a person who is thinking clearly is still not the same as a person who feels seen. That night, we had dinner at a small Italian place on Church Street. We split a bottle of wine. We talked about Eleanor, about the birthday cards she used to send, about the house in Lake Forest. We talked about who we had been at 22 versus who we were now. I did not feel fixed. Healing was not the word for what those 48 hours with Miriam gave me. What she gave me was the reminder that I existed outside of this case, that I had a history, a texture, a self that predated Marcus and Christine and all of it, and that would continue past it. That's not a small thing. In the middle of a fight for your financial life, it's actually everything. She drove back to Madison on a Sunday morning. We hugged in the parking lot longer than we usually did. I went upstairs, opened my legal folder, and got back to work. They came on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after Miriam left. I was in the lobby of my attorney's building in Oak Park waiting for Diana when I looked up and saw them through the glass entrance door. Marcus and Christine, standing on the sidewalk in their coats. They hadn't seen me yet. They were talking to each other in the low, private way of people who have arranged something together. My first thought was, of course they came together. My second thought was, they followed me here. I didn't move. I watched them come through the door. Marcus saw me first. He arranged his face quickly. Something soft, something contrite. The expression of a man delivering difficult news at a reasonable volume. "Sarah." He spread his hands slightly, a gesture meant to signal openness. "We're not here to fight. We just want to talk." Christine stood slightly behind him. She was wearing the gray coat I had always liked on her. She looked the way she always looked, composed, warm, The kind of woman strangers trusted immediately. I had trusted her immediately 22 years ago. That's the thing about charm. It doesn't change its texture just because you understand what it's been used for. You tracked me to my attorney's building, I said. That's your opening move for a conversation you claim isn't hostile? Marcus had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. We knew you had a meeting here this morning. We wanted to catch you before. How did you know I had a meeting here? A pause. Neither of them answered that. I filed the answer away and let the silence work. Sarah, Christine said, stepping forward slightly. Her voice was warm in the way that voices are warm when they have been consciously arranged to be warm. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But you have to understand what you're doing with these court filings, the subpoenas. It's not going to get you what you actually want. You want your life back. You want to feel safe. We understand that, and we want to help you get there. You want to help me, I said. We do. She held eye contact. Marcus is willing to be generous. He's not a bad person, Sarah. He made a mistake. We both did. But dragging this through discovery, depositions, making his business records public, it hurts everyone. It hurts you too. Think about what this does to your professional reputation. You're a hospital administrator. You're going to be known as the woman who tore her ex-husband's business apart in court. And there it was, wrapped in warmth, offered with a concerned expression. But there it was, your professional reputation. Let me make sure I understand, I said. You came to my attorney's building on the morning of a legal meeting to tell me that if I continue pursuing what is legally mine, I should worry about what people will think of me professionally. Christine blinked. That's not... Because if that's the concern, I said, I'd suggest that being the woman who documented 2 years of hidden asset transfers is considerably better for my professional reputation than being the woman who quietly accepted an unfavorable settlement to avoid embarrassment. Marcus's composure had thinned visibly. Sarah, we're trying to be reasonable. You transferred $190,000 out of our joint account over 26 months, I said. Reasonable isn't a word I would choose for that context. Those transfers were for business expenses. That's what depositions are for, I said. Your attorney can make that argument under oath. Christine tried once more. She shifted tactics slightly, moved away from the implicit threat and towards something older, softer. Sarah, we've known each other for 22 years. I know you. You are not someone who does this out of cruelty. You're doing this because you're scared and hurt, and I understand that. But think about what you're sacrificing. This fight, it will consume years of your life. Years. Is that really what Eleanor would have wanted for you? I looked at her for a long moment. She had used Eleanor's name. She had held my hand in a hospital room. She had counted on my grief and my warmth and my history of trusting her. And she was using all of that now, right here, in a lobby in Oak Park, as a tool. Eleanor left me what she left me, I said, because she believed I could take care of myself. I picked up my bag. I think you should leave before Diana comes down. Marcus looked like he wanted to say something further. He decided against it. Christine's warmth had drained from her expression, and what was left underneath was something harder and colder, which I found, honestly, easier to deal with. At least it was honest. They left. I stood in the lobby and breathed for a moment. I'm not going to tell you I felt nothing. There was something. A small, cold contraction in my chest, the kind that comes when people who know your history use it against you. not quite fear. Fear adjacent. The recognition that these were not people who would simply accept defeat, and that they had enough knowledge of me to aim precisely. But here is what I had learned about that feeling. It was information, not instruction. It told me they were worried. It told me they were willing to come to my attorney's building on a Tuesday morning and make veiled references to my professional reputation, which meant the subpoenas had found something worth protecting. When Diana came down in the elevator 3 minutes later, I was standing very straight. "They were here," I said, "Marcus and Christine, together, in the lobby." Diana looked at the door, then back at me. "What did they say?" "They suggested I should consider my professional reputation." She looked at me steadily. "Did it work?" "No," I said. She nodded once. "Then let's go upstairs." I followed her into the elevator and felt the fear convert, cleanly and completely, into something I would use. The deposition was scheduled for a Thursday in January, 6 weeks after the lobby confrontation. I wore gray, not to make a statement, because gray is the color I wear when I need to feel like myself and not like a version of myself assembled for an audience. Diana had prepared me for 2 hours the evening before. She'd gone through every document, every transfer date, every account number, until the facts were not things I remembered, but things I simply knew, the way you know the layout of a house you've lived in for years. She reminded me that my job in the deposition was not to argue or explain, only to answer questions accurately and let the documents do the rest. Marcus's attorney was a man named Philip Garrett. He was mid-50s, practiced, the kind of lawyer who wore confidence the way other men wore cologne. He had a way of asking questions that implied the answer was already embarrassing. I found him easy to manage. The easiest people to manage, in my experience, are the ones who assume you're less prepared than you are. The conference room was on the 17th floor of a building in the Loop. Outside the windows, the city moved in its ordinary January way. Gray sky, lake, traffic. Marcus sat across the long table beside Philip Garrett. He had dressed carefully, navy suit, a tie I recognized from a birthday dinner 4 years ago. Christine was not present in the room. She was a separate witness, deposed separately, on Diana's insistence. That insistence had been deliberate. The first 2 hours were procedural, establishing the timeline of the marriage, the joint accounts, the structure of Marcus's business entity. Philip Garrett moved through it smoothly, trying to establish that the business transfers were routine operational expenditures. Marcus answered with practiced calm. Then Diana took over. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform. She placed Gerald Park's report in front of Marcus with the care of someone laying down a hand in cards, and she asked him to explain, transfer by transfer, beginning in March 2021, what each disbursement represented. I watched Marcus's face. The first few he answered with relative fluency. General business expenses, vendor payments. Diana nodded each time and then placed the actual vendor records beside the report, which Gerald had cross-referenced. 2 of the vendors he cited had not been operational in 2021. One had been dissolved in 2019. "Can you explain the payment to Meridian Consulting in April 2021? Diana asked. "Consulting fees," Marcus said, "for market analysis." Meridian Consulting LLC was dissolved by the Illinois Secretary of State in August 2020, Diana said, 8 months before this payment. "Can you explain how you paid for services from a dissolved entity?" A pause. Philip Garrett leaned toward Marcus and they exchanged a brief, quiet exchange. "I may have the vendor name wrong," Marcus said. "You may," Diana said pleasantly. "Let's look at the next one." This continued for 90 minutes, not dramatically, not with raised voices or sudden revelations, with the methodical, relentless weight of documentation meeting contradiction. Marcus's answers became slower. He began prefacing things with phrases like, "to the best of my recollection," and "I'd have to check with my accountant," which are the phrases of someone whose recollection is failing strategically. By the third hour, something had shifted in his posture. The navy suit still looked correct, but the man inside it had gone slightly smaller. Diana placed the final document in front of him. It was a bank statement showing a $47,000 transfer in November 2022, 4 months before he told me he wanted a divorce, to a joint account held under Marcus Callahan and Christine Beaumont. "Is this your signature authorizing this transfer?" Diana asked. Marcus looked at it. He looked at it for a long time. "Yes," he said. "And this account is held jointly with Christine Beaumont?" "Yes." "Your wife's best friend?" "Yes." "Were marital funds contributed to by your wife Sarah Callahan over the course of your marriage used to fund this account?" Philip Garrett objected on grounds of characterization. Diana noted the objection and moved on. She didn't need Marcus to answer. The document answered. When Marcus's deposition ended, I walked out of the conference room into the hallway and stood at the floor-to-ceiling window looking out at the city. Diana came out a few minutes later. She stood beside me. "Christine's deposition is next week," she said. "Based on today, I'd expect inconsistencies. Her account of the timeline of the relationship will need to match his. I don't think it will." "Why not?" I asked. "Because he just said, on record, that the joint account was opened in November 2022. In her pre-deposition statement to our office, Christine indicated they became serious in early 2023, which means one of them is incorrect about when this became a financial relationship." She paused. "And that inconsistency is relevant to the dissipation claim." I nodded. Christine's deposition was the following Thursday. Diana conducted it with the same method. No theater, just documents and questions and time. I wasn't in the room. I waited in a coffee shop 2 blocks away and read a book I had been meaning to read for 2 years, a detail that felt, in a small way, like reclaiming something. Diana called me after. She said they became involved romantically in February 2023, Diana said. "He said November 2022 when he opened the account. The dates don't match. More importantly, her phone records, which we subpoenaed separately, show contact patterns with Marcus going back to early 2021. Early 2021, the same month the transfers began." "Is that enough?" I asked. "It's more than enough," Diana said. "Sarah, I want to be direct with you. Between the documented asset dissipation, the inconsistent testimony, the joint account transfer, and the phone records, we are in a very strong position. The judge is going to see a 2-year pattern. This is not a close case anymore." I sat in the coffee shop with my book open on the table and the phone against my ear, and I let that sentence land. Not a close case. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the specific, clean exhaustion of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and can finally see the place where she gets to set it down. The settlement negotiations collapsed in February. Philip Garrett made one more attempt. A revised offer that gave me the house, 60% of the documented joint assets, and a waiver of any further claims against Marcus's business. Diana laid it on the table in front of me without comment and waited. I read it. I thought about the November 2022 joint account. I thought about the dissolved vendor entities. I thought about Christine's deposition and the phone records going back to early 2021. "No," I said. Diana picked up the paper. "That's what I expected. We proceed to trial." What followed was not a Hollywood courtroom. It was 3 days of proceedings in a Cook County courtroom before Judge Margaret Okafor, a woman in her early 60s who ran her courtroom with the efficient patience of someone who had seen this particular story before and had no interest in anyone's performance. Philip Garrett argued that the business transfers were legitimate operational expenses incorrectly characterized by a non-expert forensic accountant. Diana put Gerald Park on the stand. Gerald Park was not a dramatic witness. He spoke quietly, with the precision of a man who had spent his career explaining complex financial documents to people who needed to understand them. He walked the court through 26 months of transfers, cross-referenced against business records, vendor registration filings with the state of Illinois, and bank account histories. He had prepared a summary chart. He spoke for 4 hours over 2 days. Philip Garrett's cross-examination found nothing to dislodge. Gerald Park had not characterized anything. He had documented it. Marcus testified. He was composed through the early questioning, and then Philip Garrett made the mistake of allowing him to elaborate. And Marcus, under the pressure of 3 days of proceedings and the visible architecture of his own paper trail, began to contradict things he had said in deposition. He said the November 2022 account transfer had been intended as a business holding, which was inconsistent with the account being registered in his and Christine's joint personal names. Judge Okafor noted the inconsistency on the record without comment. She didn't have to comment. The record was the comment. The judgment came down on a Friday morning in March. Judge Okafor awarded me 40% of the appraised value of the Naperville house to be paid from Marcus's assets since the house itself was to be sold. She awarded me restitution of $190,000, representing the documented dissipation of marital assets. She awarded me 62% of remaining joint assets, accounting for the greater contribution and the documented diversion. She awarded Diana's full attorney fees to be paid by Marcus, citing the pattern of asset concealment as grounds for fee shifting. She did not editorialize. She read the judgment in the same steady voice she had used throughout, and when she was finished, she moved to the next case on her docket. I sat in that courtroom and added the numbers in my head. The house sale would net approximately $340,000 at current market value. My share was $136,000. The restitution was $190,000. The joint asset distribution was another $94,000. Attorney fees saved approximately $60,000. Total $480,000. Plus Eleanor's estate, which had cleared probate 6 weeks prior, quietly, without ceremony. Robert Voss had called me on a Tuesday morning to confirm the transfer of the trust assets into an account in my name. I'm not going to tell you the number again. You know the number. Marcus stood outside the courtroom afterward with Philip Garrett, and I watched him through the glass doors before I went out. He looked like a man who had lost a great deal and was in the process of calculating exactly how much. Philip Garrett was talking. Marcus was not listening to him. His business would survive, barely. The $190,000 restitution plus legal fees would require him to restructure. The public court record was available to anyone who searched. In commercial real estate, where reputation is currency, that record would follow him. Not forever, but for years. Christine was not in the courtroom. She had not been named as a defendant. This had been a divorce proceeding, not a civil suit, and her role was as a witness. But the court record named her repeatedly. The joint account, the phone records, the timeline. She had resigned from her marketing position the week the depositions concluded. I learned this from a mutual acquaintance who mentioned it without knowing I already knew what the depositions had contained. Christine had told people she was making a change. People who had been in both our circles had grown quieter around her in the weeks since. 22 years of my name attached to hers, and now a different set of facts attached to that name instead. I walked out of the courthouse on a gray March morning onto the steps of the Cook County building and stood in the cold air. Miriam had driven down from Madison. She was waiting for me on the bottom step, hands in her pockets, wearing a bright red scarf I remembered from childhood. She looked up when I came out. "Well?" she said. I told her. She didn't cheer. She didn't perform. She just looked at me for a moment and said, "Good," and put her arm through mine, and we walked down Clark Street in the cold together. I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt like a person who had been underwater for a year and had just finally broken the surface. That is the correct feeling for that moment. I trust it completely. I bought a Craftsman house in Evanston, 4 blocks from the lake. Original hardwood floors, a study with windows on 2 sides. It needed work. I renovated it slowly and enjoyed every decision. I kept my job at Northwestern Medicine. My supervisor gave me the senior director title I'd earned. I got a dog, a beagle mix named Fig, stubborn and devoted, who greets me at the door every evening like it's the best moment of her day. I established a scholarship in Eleanor's name for women in career transition in healthcare. $10,000 a year. The most honest use I could imagine for money left by a woman who lived on her own terms. Marcus's business diminished after the court record became searchable. He sold the house, moved into a rental. He and Christine tried living together. By the following summer, they weren't. The relationship that formed in secret had to face ordinary life eventually. It couldn't. On an October evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine and Fig asleep at my feet. The kitchen light glowed warm through the window behind me. This is mine, I thought. Not because someone gave it to me, because I knew what I was worth. That was enough. I lost everything in one night. Then I rebuilt, not because I was fearless, but because I refused to let fear be the final answer. Here is what I learned. Betrayal reveals the architecture of your life, and sometimes the architecture needed rebuilding anyway. Know your worth before the world tries to assign it to you. Document everything. Trust carefully. And when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time, not the 4th. What would you have done in that parking lot at 2 a.m.? Leave me a comment. I'd love to know. And if this story found you at the right moment, you know what to do. Thank you for listening.